nearly a third of the population don't understand basic concepts like budgeting, mortgage types, New Zealand super, credit swaps, financial derivatives and pork belly futures. I added the last three. I think it's 99% don't understand the last three. So, what role do schools have in teaching financial capability? So we've got Stephen Kendall-Jones here from, now he would say Albany Junior High School. I grew up in Takapuna on the shore, and for some reason we always used to say Albany. And in those days, Albany, as we called it, consisted of a whole lot of orchards, and we would drive up to get boxes of Golden Delicious, Gravenstein, Cox's Orange, apples that don't exist anymore. It was just a huge green area then, but now it's Albany, and it's on the rise.
It's risen.
But you were saying to me that there was a Duke of Albany, was it? Is that right? Yeah, yeah. So your pronunciation is probably correct.
Yeah,
from home.
I think he was English, so.
Yeah. Anyway.
And just on that, I apologise that New Zealandish is my second language. Like a lot of the people that have been on the stage today, we speak foreign. I think I'm a winner because you'll have seen more Coronation Street than you will EastEnders and Queen's Speech. So you probably get my accent a little better.
Great accent. Okay, so Stephen, we'll kick off with responsibility for teaching young people financial capability. Who do you think is responsible?
Well, first of all, I'll just put my hands out. I'm not an expert. I'm expressing my own personal opinion. And I'll never forget a definition of expert that I was given many years ago. Ex means former, and a spurt is a drip under pressure. So I don't mind not being an expert. But for me, before I could answer that, it's sort of important that we have some definitions for people who aren't in education in the school, just to see the differences in thought processes now. So there are different levels of exposure to new skills and attitudes. So there is learning, which is simple learning, as you might imagine, of basic skills and knowledge, the acquisition, and that can be done from the age of 1 day. You've then got education, which is different. It's the structured and systematic process through which we give application, acquisition of skills and knowledge in a way that is designed by the nation, the ministry, to add to the future of the country. Then you've got instruction, and Sir Ken Robinson says it very well. If I send a letter home saying to parents we're going to give sex education, I'll get some okays. If I say we're going to do sex instruction, I might get a totally different answer. So you've got learning, education, instruction, and then the word school these days is very different. To me, school is where a community of people, or a number of people, it could be two, come together with the aim of learning or gaining some sort of education. That can be online, it can be on a street corner, it can be, as has been done in India, a hole in the wall where they put a computer and let the kids go up and play with it, and after a year they've learnt the English required to open an internet survey, and they do their own research on the internet. What we call school now is a building which is designed to deliver the structured education required. So having done that, who's responsible for it? Well, if it's learning, you're definitely talking about in the home. You are also talking about government agencies, the Commission, giving some resources for the home to do that better. And businesses, finance companies, etc., should get in at that level, in my mind, without thinking of it in terms of a short-term return. And I know that's difficult when you've got a dividend structure like we've got, but I'd love to see every company put a little bit to one side for the education of the next generation. And schools then come into the education structure. So for schools, it can be done at any age. There's a lot of schools who think that you have to wait to a certain age group. But as a Year 7 teacher, I used to use an economic system in my school, in my classroom. So each chair was an apartment. And the students had to do jobs which earned pretend money. And that was how they paid the rent for their apartment. and I got parental permission that if they couldn't pay the rent, I took the chair away and they sat on the floor. Only one kid ever did that. He was the one that you'd probably guess would give it a go. And he lasted a half an hour on the floor. And that was really interesting in terms of social studies, because the reaction from the other students towards this lad was amazingly different, because he was seen as homeless. And we had a big stuff. But whatever. So then we then had an auction at the end of every month where parents would give real things that we could then auction for the pay, and they could only bid up to what they'd earned. That can be done at any age level. There are primary schools that have shops, pretend shops in the same way. Instruction would tend to be internships, and maybe more in tertiary for specific skills, for a specific occupation. But it really is going back to the village raises the child.
You've embraced the Sorted Schools program. Why, and how's it working out for you?
Well, we're starting talking now in our school about 4 phases of understanding. And it's the me, we, them, it cycle, which relates directly to personal, social, cultural, and then whatever area of thinking you're doing, economics in this particular aspect. And if you look at the me, young people are finding it harder and harder, has been said a lot throughout the day, to come up with the concept of money. The classic learning system is also 3 ways, and I'm sorry to use jargon here, but if you're teaching maths, you start with concrete. So that's counters, and you take 2 counters, somebody takes them away from you, how many have you got left? You need to see the concrete, you need to be able to touch it. You can then move to imaging, which is actually writing the numbers or drawing a graph or some other visual explanation. And then you can only then do you go to abstract, which is where it's in your head. And you can visualize all those things, and you can come up with those kind of processes. Particularly in maths, that's a major stepping stone. Concrete, imaging, abstract. Nowadays, with money, where's the concrete? We've all done concrete, and that's why we look at young children and go, why don't they get it? Because as adults, we've gone through coins, notes. They get an FPOS card. And it doesn't go smaller as the account goes down, and it doesn't get bigger when money's put in it. So we've got some problems there in the learning process and applying that to something that is now an abstract concept. And we're trying to jump straight to abstract, and we can't. So we have to work through things like that. So that's the me. The fact that everything now is online, one of the things that I'm trying to focus on now is how we get the community working towards understanding for money. And that's quite important when you consider, and I'm going to offend every parent in the room, including myself, I'm a parent of 4. Scandinavia has a really interesting term. They call them curling parents. Do you know the sport curling, where you brush away the ice and it makes whatever it is, that stone go faster? There's a lot more now of parents brushing away any obstacles. So rather than, sorry son, and I do this every week, sorry son, you've run out of pocket money. No, you can't have whatever you're looking at. I go and top up the FPOS card. And it's part of more care for our kids, I think. It's a good thing in one way, but in terms of monetary management, it's not. So we have the curling parent model, and then the ability then to delay gratification has been spoken about today. If I got pocket money in the old days, concrete, and it was, well, I was in shillings and pence back in England. I don't know what you guys would have been here, but let's say, you know, you've got 15. You spend 5. Oh, all of a sudden I've got 10, but I want to save up for something that I can't have unless I save up my pocket money. That demands delayed gratification. When I've got an FPOS card, which could give me an overdraft, and my parents are likely to top it up anyway, I have everything more immediately. And the delayed gratification experiment was in 1972 in Stanford University. It was very interesting. And I think it's AIG did an advert in New Zealand a couple of years ago with it, where they have a marshmallow on the plate. Do you remember that one? AMP, was it? Sorry, I've offended somebody again. The marshmallow, and they got another one if they didn't eat the first marshmallow in 15 minutes. Now, that was guided by a psychologist called Michel, and he went back after 10 years. And the people who had delayed gratification had lower body mass index, They had better SAT in America, assessment scores. They had better life skills. They had also reduced liability to take risk. So fewer drug takers, fewer people speeding on the roads, etc. So that delayed gratification is a disposition that we really need to be pushing in across education, not just in money, but how do you teach that if everything's immediate? So I'd also like to address, I've made some notes here, I'm sorry, I was enthralled by all the speakers today, but the cultural aspects. One of our, and I'm saying our, I'm looking over here at the team over here, one of our groups last year, and Diane came to our school, we had a Samoan group who looked at the different cultural aspects of money. And this is the them, me, we, them. And they looked at the fact that $300 million goes back to Samoa in terms of tithes and parental return money. And they spent a good week trying to work out how they could invest a certain amount of it without affecting the poverty levels back in Samoa, and how they could then get a sustained income and a passive income that could then not reduce the income in New Zealand and still maintain the income in Samoa. So the cultural aspects, if you look at me, we, them, can also be accommodated. And the it, of course, is then the deeper economic finance theories.
The concept of having compulsory financial capability or understanding in a curriculum, do you think it should be compulsory? Could it become compulsory? Is there room for it in a busy school's curriculum?
It's a hard one. It could be accommodated. I'm sorry, I've got another framework. We also talk about skill, will, and thrill, which are three words that John Hattie is currently using with visible learning. The skill skill to will is surface knowledge, and the will to thrill is embedded knowledge. I certainly think that that we should be prioritizing through the ministry the skill and the will to be financially capable. The thrill, I think, would tend to be a little later, and it depends very much on your community. I think for a good nation, it's just my opinion, we need to definitely have a certain level of equality and equity in skill and will. Every culture, gender, ethnicity, doesn't matter where you live, you need to get an extended understanding of the skill and the will, and I think that has to be prioritized. The thrill, if you're in an area school, that might be different to being like my school on the North Shore, where I'm surrounded by entrepreneurs, I'm surrounded by professionals, I'm surrounded by people who have maybe a different perspective of what money is all about compared to somebody who's on a sustenance farm, for example. So I think the thrill will depend on a number of things, including the capabilities of the teachers, the ability to draw in from outside sources. On the North Shore, it's easy. In the middle of the Waikato, I'm not sure. So yeah, skill, will, definitely prioritise. Thrill, let the community decide where their priorities are.
Should it be a standalone subject or part of other courses?
I can only speak about what we do. So we integrate the skill level with maths. And mathematics in the New Zealand curriculum has a component of money management in it. So it's quite easy to do that, but we have had to make space in our curriculum and our teaching to integrate it. But I'm informed by my team that it's going extremely well on that level. The thrill, we then add some spice. So to embed the learning, we incorporate market days. In our food technology, our kids don't just make pizzas, they have to design a business, packaging, a brand. How are they going to sell the pieces that they make? They have to also do like test 10 cheeses and things like that. But so we incorporate business thinking, entrepreneurialism into that as an integrated subject. And then we have a business academy, which is for year 9s and 10s, where we are teaching all aspects of finance. And I say teach, that's quite loose. We present information, then the kids discuss that information, and then we go back and challenge their thinking, and they come out with an authentic task. It's end of last year, Money Week, we had the commission come and visit one evening, didn't you, Diane? And I learned so much from my kids because they looked at everything from budgeting to internet fraud to KiwiSaver to whether you should rent your first student apartment or buy it, to investments, to compound interest, things that they went away and looked at for themselves with the provocation of really excellent teachers and came up with a much deeper understanding. So,
how do the teachers find it? Do they feel competent in teaching these subjects?
I think I'm lucky. I've got, in my opinion, I've got some of the best teachers in the country in my school. But we're not experts. And especially drips under pressure. I mean, we don't have any of those in my school, but we could do with the expertise. We know how to teach, we know how to get the kids thinking, we know how to, like I say, provoke further thought, we know how to embed learning, we know how to connect with the kids. Are we experts in financial models? No. The kids can get themselves to a very high level of understanding compared to other kids of the same age group who are not exposed to that level of teaching. But we could do with some help, I think.
Mm. So how many hours a week or month or whatever would you have classes involved with financial capability?
It depends on the year level. We're a year 7 to 10 school. We're the first middle school, as we call it, in New Zealand from 10 years ago. So we take from 11-year-olds to 15-year-olds. The 11-year-olds would be exposed to it during the maths classes. They have five maths classes a week. And there'll be particular times of the year where they do that extensively. So it does vary depending on the year level, on the time of year, sorry, and also on the year level, because then as we go into year 9s and 10s, there are options available where they can explore our business academy. They can become more entrepreneurial, so there is more exposure. Mm. And that would differ from school to school.
And you don't feel that your kids are missing out on having more on English, maths, etc.?
Not at all.
History?
Not at all.
There's no problem there?
No. I'll just say no. Because the depth of thinking that they come up with...
Do the parents embrace it, or are they questioning, saying, oh, look, you should be concentrating on the 3 R's and just forget about this financial stuff?
But this is the 3 R's. You have to make up an R for finance. But we really need 4 R's. And the parents in our community, I was on the video then, I had my hair spiky, you might not have recognised me, but it was definitely, they are blown away. The community itself came to that night, for example, and didn't realise the depth of understanding that their children had. And they walked away going, geez, I never knew that much about XYZ, KiwiSaver. And my son's just taught it me, or my daughter's just introduced me to the compound interest. I didn't understand it before. And this is a high decile professional community, and the children are becoming the teachers. So yeah, the parents love it.
Would the experience be very different in a decile 1 school? How?
It would be, and I think the skill, it's a bit like literacy. Children have to come in with a certain level of knowledge at school, or else school has to catch up that knowledge. So if you're born into a house where it's full of books, and you're a professional family, say. There's some interesting, Roundtree Foundation in England did some research. If up to the age of 3, a child in a professional family gets exposed to about 3,000 words a year. In a beneficiary family, it's about 300 words a year. And then they come into school with such a different understanding of vocabulary. If you relate that to finance, I think we might have the same problem. I think there are houses that talk about money, that make the kids work for money. You know, I'll do chores, yeah, this is towards your spends. There are other areas and other areas of New Zealand which, unfortunately, they don't have the money to give them. It doesn't matter whether they wash up 5 times a week. They still can't pay them. So, yeah, the skill level, we try at our school to try and differentiate that. We're on the North Shore, but we get a heck of a lot of kids. Up to 300 kids are from off. We get a lot of kids coming to us because we've become a bit of a magnet school, and we attract a lot of people who are aspirational in terms of their education. So we do get low socioeconomic status children. We do get different ethnicities, Gender balance is a little bit towards girls, about 53 to 47%. So we have to differentiate when they come in at the skill level. Get them up to a certain level and then start building on that.
Is it going to be a problem for our society generally, though? It just sounds like it's going to increase the inequalities that already exist in our society, because they're going to benefit, the decile 10 schools, aren't they? And the decile 1 schools will not. Or is that too harsh?
That's actually probably one of the biggest misconceptions about education in this country. I can honestly say that the level and the passion of teaching in a decile 1 is extraordinary in New Zealand. I'm just saying, is this program for all schools? It's from decile 1s to decile 10 schools? It is? Okay. Yeah, definitely. Oh, sorry, the Upper Harbour Salty Cluster kind of program we're talking about, are we? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So all deciles will benefit from that process, definitely.
Okay, well, we just hit the 0000, just about hit the final 0. Any questions? There, yes.
Hi. I'm surprised you hesitated when the question was put whether or not this should be part of the curriculum. I, as a parent, absolutely think that it should, and as a former teacher who taught economics at school, think that it absolutely should. And if the Minister here today would take that message away, get it into the curriculum ASAP.
Sorry, was that a question? And the hesitation I can explain because I'm not in charge of the curriculum. What people people tend not to understand is a lot of direction comes from the ministry. So whether it should be in the curriculum, it's really not a decision of mine. But my opinion is I agree with you 100%.
Any other questions?
Kia ora koutou. Angela again, just wearing an education hat. It is in the curriculum. So acknowledging our Ministry of Education folk here as well. There was a collaboration between the Commission, the Ministry, and a number of other folk interested in financial education. Page 39 gives it as an example of integrated learning, like Albany Junior High has taken an approach, and there's a whole suite of resources to assist schools to make this a reality for young people. We do have a very devolved education system. That means that schools design their own curriculum for the students and learners in their school community, but just to assure you, it is there. Kia ora.
Thank you, Angela. I was hoping you'd speak out on that one. There's a bit of confusion about whether it's in the curriculum or not. It's not in the curriculum as a standalone item. It's in the curriculum embedded in other subjects in a way that has taken a fair bit of time and effort to get it right. So, but it's very definitely there. Right. Can we put our hands together, please, and thank our Stephen Kendall-Jones.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks.